Do you really think that the most important thing about the second day in Bahrain was that Charles Leclerc finished first? Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because inside the Ferrari garage, they were not celebrating P1, they were analyzing something much deeper. The data that the engineers saw after those more than 60 laps not only validated the car's radical concept, but also set off a small technical alarm that could mark the entire season. What happened on that second day was not a simple fast lap. It was a silent statement that Ferrari has built an extremely fast, but dangerously demanding car. And when I explain what that data really revealed, you'll understand why this top spot means a lot more than it seems. The second day of testing in Bahrain began as just another pre-season session, but ended up becoming an internal turning point for Ferrari. While outside many only saw a timetable with Charles Leclerc at the top, inside the box the conversation was completely different. It was not about the 1 minute and 34.273 seconds that placed him first, nor the half-second advantage over his direct rivals. The truly momentous thing was that, for the first time in a long time, the car was saying exactly what the simulator had promised weeks before in Maranello. That correlation may seem like a minor technical detail to the average fan, but in Formula One it is the foundation on which an entire season is built. In previous cycles, Ferrari had suffered worrying differences between what they projected in CFD and the wind tunnel, and what the car actually did on the track. This gap generated erratic developments, parts that did not work as expected, and weekends where performance evaporated without a clear explanation. In Bahrain, however, engineers began to see something different. The numbers fit. The downforce curves, the balance values, the projected degradation, everything was within the expected range. And that's what really hit home. Because when a car confirms on the track what the theoretical model anticipates, the team stops working blindly. It means that every future improvement can be designed with confidence, that every adjustment will have a predictable response. It is the difference between reacting to problems and building a strategic evolution. On that second day, Ferrari wasn't just fast, it was consistent. But the analysis did not stop at the general correlation. By breaking down Leclerc's telemetry, engineers detected very specific patterns that reinforced the thesis that the car's radical concept worked. Corner entry was aggressive, allowing the driver to attack the apex without causing severe rear-end instability. In previous seasons, that aggressiveness often translated into sudden oversteer or a loss of confidence. This time, the car responded progressively. Furthermore, in the slow areas of Sakhir, traction was solid, something key on a circuit where the long straights punish any deficit on corner exit. Another critical point was tire degradation. In medium batches, the pattern was linear, without abrupt drops in performance. That stability indicates that the car maintains its downforce more consistently and is not dependent on an extremely narrow window to function. It is a sign of technical maturity. It is, in practical terms, the difference between an explosive car on a lap and a competitive car in a race. However, even in this moment of validation, a shadow appeared. When reviewing the energy management during the fast lap, it was observed that the hybrid system was working very close to the optimal limit, with the risk of clipping if more aggressive maps were forced on long straights. This doesn't ruin the picture, but it does introduce a clear warning. The car is fast, yes, but it needs surgical precision in power and temperature management. And there is the heart of the second day. Ferrari didn't just discover that it has speed. He discovered that it has a solid concept, technically aligned with his simulation tools, but that requires absolute discipline to stay within its ideal window. It is a car that rewards fine control and punishes excess. What for many was just AP1 in pre-season, for Ferrari engineers was a structural validation of the project, a confirmation that the work of months is beginning to be supported by real data. But it was also a reminder that the line between success and failure can be extremely thin when designing such a sophisticated car. If the first impact of the second day in Bahrain was the validation of the concept, the second blow was much more delicate. Ferrari understood that it had built an extremely competitive but extremely demanding car, and that, in Formula One, can be a differential advantage or a constant source of technical tension. When the engineers dug into Leclerc's long-run data, they found something that gave them real confidence. The car was not only fast on one lap, it also maintained stable performance in the middle stints. Tire degradation followed a progressive pattern, without abrupt peaks or sudden drops in downforce. This is essential because it means that the aerodynamic balance does not collapse when grip begins to decrease. In past seasons, Ferrari suffered precisely from this phenomenon. The car worked in the ideal window, but as soon as it left it even slightly, performance plummeted. That didn't happen here. The behavior was more linear, more predictable. And that word predictable is gold for a technical department, because it allows you to build strategies, anticipate reactions, and adjust the car with confidence. But at the same time, the element that turns the SF26 into a machine of surgical precision appeared. Even on the fastest lap that put Leclerc first, telemetry showed the energy management system was working at its operational limit. Risk of clipping was detected on long straights if the deployment map became more aggressive. This means that the car can extract very high performance, but the battery, temperature, and software management must be exact. There is no room for improvisation. And this is where the second day stops being a simple confirmation and becomes internal notice. Ferrari has created a car that works when all the parameters are perfectly aligned. The interaction between active aerodynamics and mechanical balance proved to be much more stable than in the first kilometers of testing, where the rear package had generated moments of load loss that were difficult to manage. That improvement indicates progress, but it also confirms that the system is complex. The more sophisticated a concept is, the more delicate its control. And the SF26 seems to be precisely that. A car with very high potential within its ideal window, but with little tolerance for deviations in energy, temperature, or track conditions. In Bahrain, with hot asphalt and relatively stable conditions, the car responded as it should. The question that began to circulate in the garage was not if it is fast. It was what happens when that external stability disappears, because if the car requires extreme precision in hybrid maps and aerodynamic synchronization, any variation, a drop in temperature, a change in wind, a stint in traffic, can strain that balance. And that's where a promising project can be compromised if it's not perfectly understood. The fascinating thing about the second day is that Ferrari did not leave the circuit euphoric, came out analytical. They had confirmed that the radical concept works. They had seen real correlation with the simulator. They had validated traction, corner entry, and degradation. But they had also discovered that the car requires absolute discipline. It is a very powerful tool, but not forgiving. The second day of testing in Bahrain did not close a definitive conclusion. It opened a responsibility. Ferrari can no longer hide behind the mystery of the concept. He can no longer speak of theoretical potential. Leclerc's data showed that the car works, that the correlation with the simulator is real, and that the technical basis is solid. Now the challenge is much more complex, sustaining that performance when the environment is no longer controlled. Because the tests are laboratory. Racing is chaos. In Bahrain, the SF26 showed aggressive entry, efficient traction, and progressive degradation, all within a stable window. But in a real Grand Prix, variables appear that the second day did not fully expose. Traffic, dirty air, wind changes, safety car phases, strategic decisions under pressure. And if the telemetry made anything clear, it is that the car works very close to its optimal energy limits. That means under ideal conditions it can be devastating, but under competitive stress it will need perfect execution. This is where the human factor comes in. Leclerc seems naturally comfortable with the car's behavior. His style of attacking corner entry, loading the front axle, and relying on initial rotation fits what the SF26 is offering. But the real test won't be whether he can clock a 134 in testing. It will be whether he can repeat that control when he has a rival less than a second away, when the battery needs defensive management, when the stint requires protecting tires without losing pace. And for engineers, the challenge is even greater. The correlation achieved in Bahrain gives them a clear basis for development. It means they can evolve the car with confidence because they understand how it responds. But it also means that any update must respect the delicate balance between active aerodynamics, mechanical balance, and hybrid management. They cannot afford to introduce an improvement that breaks the harmony that costs so much to validate. The final message of the second day is forceful. Ferrari has not built a fragile car. He has built a precise car. And precision in Formula One separates the contenders from the champions. If the team manages to maintain the technical coherence that it saw in Bahrain, if it manages to manage the energy without falling into critical clipping, if it maintains that linear degradation in changing conditions, then this project has real grounds to fight at the top. But if the window narrows under pressure, if energy management becomes an issue in qualifying or race defense, that same sophistication can work against you. Ferrari delivered a quiet technical coup on the second day of testing. They didn't lift a trophy, but they validated a project. And when in Formula One the data supports the theory, the potential stops being a promise and begins to become a real danger for the rest of the grid. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.